Good morning, everyone. As I promised, we're going to be working on making the form for a mouse body today. I'm working on a mouse like this, and I like to give him nice little fingers so that I can pose it around my instruments and other things and little toes. So we're going to go into how we're going to create these fingers, create our body shape, and also we'll go ahead and we'll add a tail to this one. So what you're going to need today to do this is some wire. I like to use a 22 gauge jewelry wire. It is very thin and very flexible, but it's a great size for little mouse fingers and toes. Pipe cleaners, that's what we're going to use to wrap our wire with. Glue, I usually like to use this E6000 because it dries clear and flexible. Little scissors to make any snips. Wire cutters and pliers, and some wool to wrap our fingers. I'm going to be using this. It's a merino wool. It comes off in nice long fiber, so I like that. And a wax to go over the fingers. We're going to be talking about the new PowerTex Power Wax today because the old one is no longer available. And I'm very sad about that because that was my favorite wax to use. But you can get this one to work for a lot of things, so we'll talk about that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our 22 gauge wire and we're going to cut 10 pieces. I am not good at measuring and keeping things the same. I kind of just eyeball them, but I'm probably going to do about 8 inches on the wire, I guess. Maybe a little bit more. You'll be able to snip this at the end, so I just always try to get a little bit more than I need. We're going to be cutting 10 pieces. Don't worry if they are not exactly even. You're going to come back and you're going to snip the ends later. So you're just trying to get a roughly even segment. Now, if I was going to do a larger mouse or a larger animal, then I would just use a thicker wire. Okay, that's 6. Eight. And 10. Okay, so that's all that we're going to need from that. So they're roughly the same size. A couple of them are smaller. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to divide it into 2 segments of 5. One of these is going to turn into our hands, and one of these is going to turn into our feet. So what you're doing is you are twisting these wires together. You can use your fingers. You can grab it with a pair of pliers if that's easier for you. At this point, I do not twist it all the way down to the bottom because I'm not sure exactly how long I'm going to snip off from my fingers, but I want to do it enough so that I'm creating this core part of the body. So again, I'm just going to twist this one together. Oops, runaways. Sometimes I'll grab it with 2 pliers too, one on each end, especially if I'm doing a thicker wire because it's easier to twist it. But this wire is so thin and flexible, it's not that difficult. So I'm just going to keep coming down here. So I got a general shape. So now I have 2 pieces. They both have 5 wires on each side and they're twisted together. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to twist it in half. And I'm going to take the top and I'm just going to twist it together. Just a little bit. That's going to create my head. And this is going to create where my arms are. You can already see I'm going to want this a little bit longer than what I did. A little closer to the bottom. Sometimes it's easier to twist this after you start to form your shape, because it's just twisting to the middle here. It's not twisting all the way down to the end. All right, so this part here is going to become my head. And we're going for something like this. So now the second one, I'm going to take it and I'm just going to cross it on the first. So you can see I have my bottom one, almost like a triangle shape, and this one's going over it. And then I'm just twisting and twisting. So you can see this side got a little longer than my first. I must not have lined it up well enough. So we're gonna just slide this over a little bit. Okay. So we are twisting down and up. So now it looks almost like a person, and you're gonna take this middle and you're twisting it down. So this is going to be your head area, your arms, and your legs for your little mouse. Now you can do legs like this that come all the way down. You just leave a longer segment here. If you want to have it just kind of sitting on its butt, you can have the little whole thing get covered, but for right now we're gonna work on it like this. So I can see I'm at a pretty good size for these. So what I'm gonna do at the moment is I'm just gonna snip these pieces so they're even. Just gonna snip, snip, and my arms are probably a little long. So I'm gonna even those up. I like to leave my arms a little bit long so that I can wrap them around instruments. They have a little bit of room. If your arms get too long, you can always cross them like that, and you can create a cross piece to shorten your arms. That's what's nice about this thin flexible wire, is it can move. Okay, so I've got my general shape. Now I do see that this side is a little longer. See how those aren't quite even? So I'll just even that up, and then as I open up my fingers, I'm just gonna untwist this a little bit. This is when you're going to find your 5 little fingers and 5 little toes. You do that just by opening this wire up. There we go. Got 5 there. Got 5 there. We're going to do the bottom. Actually, twist this up just a little bit more on this side. Okay, and I do like to leave these sections a little longer than what my finished fingers and toes are going to be. I will go over it with the pipe cleaner and then my wool to make them smaller, but this just gives me a little bit more room to play with. All right, so we've got this. Now what you can also do at this point, you can trim them a little bit. Just make your pinky and thumb a little bit smaller. If you want to, you can do the same on the bottom, or you can just kind of leave it so that it's all the same. All right, so we got our little shape. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do my fingers and toes before I put my pipe cleaner on it. It really doesn't matter which way you work with, but I like to just kind of come up underneath. So we're gonna take our merino wool, and we're pulling it out, and what you wanna do is you wanna create a real nice thin piece. So you don't wanna pull hard. You're not trying to separate it, but you're just trying to work with those merino fibers to thin them out. When you do this, if you take a second to just kind of roll it between your fingers, it's just gonna make it a little bit stronger and less likely to pull apart as you wrap it around. So I'm actually gonna do half of mine, one side before I put the pipe cleaners and one side after I put the pipe cleaners, just so you can see. So I'll take my glue. Again, this is the E6000 glue. This is probably my #1 go-to for doing fingers and toes. I use a pH neutral glue to do a lot of the work as well. But this one's really nice because it's super flexible when it dries. So if you've seen how I do my bird feet, this is very similar. So I'm just going to thinly wrap up each section of toes here. I want to try to come to the end and cover that, and then go back down. If you're not a fan of using wool for this, you can use thread. It's less likely to pull apart. It just gives a different look to your finished product. Come up over this tip. I want to try to cover the majority of the silver. All right, so I've got 2 of these. Come back up for the middle ones. And just take your time with this. I like to try to keep my wool flat. I don't want it to twist too much because I get a thinner coverage that way. But again, that's going to be your personal preference as well. And if you want thicker fingers, you can always just wrap a little bit more of the wool. And we're going to wrap it around the arm just a little bit. I have just a little bit of glue on my fingers, which is going to help seal it together. But you're also going to come over this part with the wax, which will also keep it together. So there you have one. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this other side as well. Get a new piece of wool. I have a real short segment of merino, that's why I'm pulling it apart like this. You might be able to pull off a larger section that's thinner, and then you don't have to pull it apart as much. I'm just trying to use up some little bits and pieces that I have around. Okay, so now we're going to do this side. And we're going to wrap it with our wool. All right, there's our first 2. Two more little toes to go. Now when I use this for larger animals, a lot of times I'll use a black wire and just leave the little tips coming through, almost like little claws. So you can use the same technique to do a lot of different things. When I do a larger animal, I'll do this and then I'll cover it with wool. And then you just have your little tips of your wire showing through, which will look like their claws. All right, we're going to tie that one off. So that's 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this wax on this one side because I want you to see the difference of what it looks like with 1 coat versus 2 coats of this new Power Wax, and it takes a long time for this one to dry. So the old style Power Wax was a lot creamier, a lot waxier, and it dried a lot faster. So this is the old style, and it's very white and it's very creamy, and it keeps that consistency. And I really, really, really loved it for my figures, but they don't make it anymore. So I'm trying to work with this new style Power Wax. So this is a lot oilier. It's not as creamy. It tends to melt, and it takes a long time to dry. It also has a bit of an odor, but that odor will dissipate as it dries. So for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to coat each of these little claws. With the old style Power Wax, I could do 1 coat of wax and it was good to go. It was thick enough, it had a good finish, and everything was perfect. With this one, I've found that I need 2 before I like the way it looks. So what you want to do if you're using this new style Power Wax is you want to make sure that you really coat the surface and that it really has a chance to sink into your wool. It doesn't sit on top quite as much as the older style. And as you can see when I'm doing this, I still have a lot of flyaways and little pieces. It creates a wetter finish, so it doesn't hold it the same way. So you can see how I'm getting wax on the surface, but it's not really sealing it like a beeswax or the old style. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So we're going to just let this side dry a little bit. And then when I go to put it on the second side, you can see the difference between 1 and 2 coats, hopefully, if it has enough time to dry. I will say with this version of Power Wax, you want to leave some more dry time. I would make a couple of these and then let it dry overnight because it just takes longer for this to dry to a nice finish. But what you will get with a nice finish is you can see how these are nice. They're nice and waxed and thin, and you don't have all the flyaways. It just takes longer to get to that point. All right, so I'm going to do my pipe cleaner so you can see it, and then I'll do the other side. And by the time I put wax on this side, hopefully this one will be ready to move forward. So to do the pipe cleaner, you're just going to wrap it around. So if I've already done my waxed fingers, and again, it's just your preference of the order that you want to do it, I wrap it around the edge and I try to tuck in that little end because I don't want any sharp ends coming out. So I'm going to go up the head and down, and it's your preference if you want to go down the body next or if you want to go do the arms. It really does not matter. I just try to wrap it around so that I can finish with the end of my pipe cleaner and I don't really have to trim it off. But if you do, you just take little snips and you trim that off. Okay, so now we're going to take one more pipe cleaner and we're going to do the other side. Now the only difference on doing your pipe cleaners first versus second is if you do the pipe cleaners first, you can wrap your wool around the pipe cleaner, which will help grip to it. And if you do your fingers before, you're just gluing underneath the pipe cleaner. Either way, it's your preference, whatever you prefer. There's no right way. I tend to go back and forth, honestly. I just do what works with me on that given day. All right, and then we're going to just come down the bottom here. And tuck in that end. So you can see how it's coming together. This side you can still see is pretty wet. It's not smooth. You know, it's taking a longer time for that wax to settle in. So we're going to take the chance now to do this other side. So I'm just going to re-separate these out a little bit. Get my piece of merino. Get it nice and thin. And I'll do this other side. So in this case, I'm just going to wrap it around the pipe cleaner, and the pipe cleaner helps to grab the wool. So that's the benefit of doing the pipe cleaner first. But again, it's just your preference. And you want to try to wrap to the ends. But I'm trying to keep my piece of wool really thin so that I can keep these nice and small. So if I'm making something like a bear or a raccoon or something with claws, I will do this exact same thing, but use a bigger piece of wire. And then after I wrap it with the wool, I will go ahead and I will wax all the individual claws, and then I will add my wool over the top to needle felt to create paws. And that way I can trim back the edge of the paws so that the claws are shown. Okay, and I've got one more on this side. It's okay if these little fingers move around. You can reposition them how you like, and if you need to trim the ends after this, you can trim the ends after this. It's got a little thin at the end right here. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off because it's gotten so thin. And then I'm just going to double up and kind of attach those two segments together. And that's going to give me a thicker piece to finish this up with. So if you happen to pull your wool apart, which happens to me quite frequently, you can just kind of start it back, or you can start off wrapping down here again. So then I'm just going to wrap this around into the pipe cleaner. Doesn't matter if you go up a little ways, because that's all going to be covered with your fur. All right, so we got one. Little fingers. I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at this side before I do my last one, and I'm just going to try to smooth it out a little bit more. So you can see now that the wax has soaked in a little bit, it's a little bit easier to smooth the surface. So with this new style wax, what I'm doing is I just come back to it again and again as it dries and take the time to smooth it out. And then I will, once it's completely dry, I will add one more coat of wax over the top to smooth it out. And these moves, I'm just going to trim this guy a tiny bit. Okay, so now we're going to do our last little foot. Feel free to fast forward this. If you're going at a faster speed, you know what you're doing, you can fast forward it. The next thing that we're going to do is get to our tail and attach our little tail. So you can see how it does attach the pipe cleaner a little bit. So if you prefer that security of wrapping it around the pipe cleaner, just do your pipe cleaners first. And I don't know if you've noticed as I'm doing this, but I like to go from one side to the other side. I like to bounce back and forth, and I do a quick little wrap around the leg in between so that it keeps all my little toes separate. When I've gone from one to the other, it ends up pulling them together. And I wrapped it around the foot, the leg area. I like to keep them separate. And you'll want to make sure that you pull them apart as you're going. The closer they are, the harder it is to wrap around. And especially with this thin 22 gauge wire, they move very, very easily. If you are having trouble in trying to use such a thin wire, just use a thicker wire and see if it helps you a little bit easier. The hardest thing for me is wrapping around the tips because it wants to kind of fall off the side. So again, we're going to come down, going around this leg part, and then I'll come back up. And that just gives me a good bit of definition between my toes. And if I have these little tips that I missed and I don't like them afterwards, I'll just trim them off with the wire cutters. So it's no big deal. All right, so we are going to now do our wax on this side. Again, still using this power wax. Giving it a good coating. So what I like to do is I like to make several of these bodies. And first I'll make up the bodies, and then I will do all my feet at the same time so that I can just do one round of wax, let them sit, and then go back later. I do that with my feet sometimes, and beaks. I'll just create all my bodies to my animals. So now you can see how we're coming back here. It's still not even close to dry, unfortunately, with this new power wax. But it will dry. Give it an hour or two. You keep coming back and you just keep working at those little claws until they start to get waxier. And it does happen as it dries. It does create a nice, hard, clear wax. It does work, but it does take a little bit longer than it has in the past. So I'm putting this one to the side just because it's wet and will take time to dry. And I'm going to pull this little guy out. So you can see how I have all these little digits here. You can squish them together and make them as small as you want to do. Okay. But now I've got my body. It's all wrapped in my pipe cleaner, and I've got my little digits, and we're going to do a tail real quickly. So I'm coming over here. The tail is going to be done pretty much the exact same way as the body. I like to make my tails a little bit stiff though. I like to be able to use my tails to hold up my animal when it's sitting. So I go a little bit stiffer on my tails. So I'm going to do usually an 18 or a 20 gauge wire, just depending how stiff I want my tail. and I'm going to cut out a piece about the length that I want my tail. I always go a little longer. It's easier to cut it off than it is to add it on. So then I am just going to wrap the wire and the pipe cleaner together. So I'm doing about half the pipe cleaner. Okay, and this is the section that's going to be my tail. And if it was just a pipe cleaner, it bends, but it's flimsy. But with this, I can really pose it however I want. I can use it to hold something, and I can also use it to hold up my animal. So same thing, I'm going to take my merino wool. I like to use the same color that I use for my claws, and I'll use that same color as the inside of the ears too. Again, I'm going to pull it out to thin it. You can just take a long strip if you have a longer piece. This does not have to be as thin. So what I do here is I start at the top and I just wrap it down. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm not trying to cover it at this point. I'm just doing a quick wrap. Now that I get to the bottom, this is where I'm going to create my tail. So I'm going to wrap the tip. You can see how it kind of wants to come off in parts. We are going to wax this, which is going to help. You can also take a little bit of the tip off. But at this point, you're going to think that the tip of your tail is going to be a little thinner than the top of your tail. So I am just going to carefully wrap. When I wrap, I want to overlap so that I'm covering all of the white and all of the black. So I've got a little bit of a thicker piece of wool. And I'm just going to roll it up. I want to keep this somewhat tight. You will be going over it with wax, so if it's not perfect, do not worry. Just working my way up. I'm thicker now on my wool. I started off with a thinner section so I could get the bottom part a little thinner. And now I'm working my way up with a thicker section. So you can see it's a little bit thicker. And if I needed to make it thinner, I would just pull at it. And I'm going to show you this right here. I'm not going to have enough to go all the way up. So I'm just going to thin this out. I'll take this piece, which I was using before, and I'm just going to kind of connect it together by rolling it a little bit, just to get those fibers to knit. And then as I come around, I'm just going to carefully try to roll it in to that area, and then I have my new piece of wool. So if I decide that it's not as thick as I need it to be, that's how I add more. So I made mine a little bit thicker in the base, thinner at the tip. And I'm going to come right up to about the end here. And again, I'm just going to twist it into that pipe cleaner. The pipe cleaner is going to help grip it and hold your ends. And I'm actually going to show you this on the old style power wax just so you can see the difference. So this is a thicker, creamier. So if you do happen to have this on hand, this just works a little bit faster. Again, I take a good bit of it. I like to really coat the surface. Try to save every little bit I can. But you can see how that coats it, and it gives more of a white coating. It doesn't soak in as much. And that's going to dry a lot faster than the other one. But again, I'll let this dry for a little bit, and then I'll come back to it and work on it a little bit more. And then what I do is I go ahead and a lot of times I will start off the wool for my body. I will do a core shape. You can do this before or after you do that, but you're just wrapping your tail around your body. Cut off a little excess. And that's going to be your tail. And that will dry, the wax will dry. And so at this point, what I would do is I would start wrapping it for my core. I would tightly wrap my arms and my legs and my body and my head, and I would build out the shape of my mouse. And then I will add all of the details. But I'm gonna stop the video here because it's already over 30 minutes. And I will do another one that shows how I build up the rest of my mouse. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope this helps.